Word of the day, limpid. Limpid describes the things that are perfectly transparent or clear, or that are simple in style, like this podcast. Just kidding. There's nothing simple. It's transparent, but there's nothing simple about what this podcast is. All right, what's good, everybody? Welcome back to Chopping It Up with P. Scott. I'm Prescott Kelly. Today is Monday, July 15th. Glad to have you back with us. I keep forgetting to do this on the live. You can reach us at choppingitupwithpscott@gmail.com. No spaces, no apostrophe, anything like that. And if we make a boo-boo, reach out to the show. We'll enter you in a raffle at the end of the quarter. We'll throw some money out. I did that a couple months ago, then I stopped doing it. It's just something that it wasn't in my repertoire already, and I kind of got lost in it, but that is a big thing. Like, share, subscribe, smash the 5-star reviews here and on the audio platforms. On today's episode, Jalen Brunson's hometown discount. Ooh. Joe Burrow's got an 18-game schedule. Thought process. Is Josh Allen the new Phillip Rivers? Will Kawhi Leonard retire? Father-son moment that I had with my kiddo. And maybe we'll get into this Trump situation. Maybe. Make sure that you are checking out the Mac Truck Podcast, THEE, with Mackenzie Brooks, Wizzo Talk with Paul Wizzo, and the Houston Sports State of the Union podcast, hosted by the president of Houston Sports, which is Nick Stevenson. So, before we get into everything, I want to give a shout out to Camden Coleman. He's been kind of in my inbox the last couple of days, my personal, and like not so much the page. It's been like, yo, like, when's the next episode? When are you going to get on this thing? And, you know, I kind of stopped doing, well, I don't want to say stop doing it, but there's some days like you just don't have it. You know, I put on the page when I'm intending to go live, but there's certain times that you just don't have it in you. Work 5 days a week. This is another project, you know, husband, father, like there's all these things that are contributing. And you feel like you have it the day before you do it. And then you get in that moment, you're having a good day off. And you're like, yeah, I really don't want to take anything away from it. So, but he has been very much like, dude, when's the next one? Which really means a lot to me as far as somebody who's willing to be that engaged with what you do. Is, you know, because you could be doing anything. You could be listening or watching, whatever. And when you're here. And that means a lot to me. So with all of that mushy stuff being said, let's get into the first topic at hand. So Jalen Brunson signs an extension with the Knicks. And when I'm going through this in my mind, like there's so much money left on the table. And what we love to do, because these guys make so much money now, is we want to put them in a box of, well, if winning's really the most important thing to you, don't take a max deal. You know, do what's right, parenthetically, quotationally, to put yourself in the best position to win. Which I can understand, but there really haven't been that many dudes in professional sports who have done that, especially done it religiously. Like the one who really comes to mind is Tom Brady, and he's one we consider the greatest quarterback and the best football player. You know, you can make your arguments for, you know, Jerry Rice or, you know, LT, whatever you want to do. You can make the argument, but that's like overwhelmingly, it feels like the consensus is Brady, and that's one of the reasons why. Was never the highest paid player, even at his position, much less just in the game of football. So when Jalen Brunson does this on the surface, it looks like that is how you do it. That's how you be a team player. And if you want to be able to have the assets or the money to be able to acquire more talent, that's what you have to do. And there's a yes and a no to that. There's one, I feel like he's almost disrespecting himself. Now, the money that was reported that he left on the table, it looked like it was like 130 million, but in reality, it's only about 35 million, which is still a lot because that's millions plural, right? Like that's still a lot of money to leave on the table. But given that he's only making on average, about $40 million a year, when you see that some of these dudes are going to be making 50, 60, and then upwards of $70 million in the next couple of years, until he reaches like his 10 years of service where he can make upwards of 80, he's not going to make that money until the back end of his career. But what that is, there's two things. One, that is him showing way too much faith, I believe, in the Knicks. Given James Dolan and what that man has done for as long as he's done it, that's putting a lot of faith. Now, I know that Rick Brunson's part of it and Leon Rose, and like there's a lot of family oriented stuff going on, right? Because there's the agent and the person who runs basketball operations, and then the connection with Rick and Jalen. There's a lot of nepotism in that organization. But one is putting a lot of faith in them to do the right thing for him, on top of the fact that it's somewhat anecdotal, but I remember when I used to DJ and I was now these are two completely different things, obviously, but I want you to stay with me and draw the parallels. Well, I was new into that realm and I wanted to just get gigs. And there were times where other bands, if it was I DJed at a country bar, which was really awkward, but there were certain times where there would be live entertainment and either A, they wouldn't show up, or B, they would dip out early. So me living relatively close to some of these establishments, I'd be like, well, let me just go grab my gear. I'll do it for free. And one of the other, entertainment businesses pulled me to the side one day and basically said, you need to knock it off because you're not just hurting your business, you're hurting my business, you're hurting everybody's business. By you saying that you'll do stuff for free, one, they're going to waste your time because they're going to expect you to continue to do that. So you're taking money out of your pockets and then you're taking money out of mine. And I didn't really think about it at the time. I was just thinking about it from the perspective of, well, I'm just trying to make a name for myself. What does it matter if I'm doing it for free? But they had a really great point. I was costing them money and I was costing me money. Jalen Brunson, to me, that so there's one aspect of it, right? But the other part is, so Jalen Brunson's been put on this pedestal after 1 year. Before this past season, it was looked upon that he was an idiot for not re-signing with the Mavericks because apparently they offered him more money, but he wanted to go play for the Knicks. So he took less money initially to go play for the Knicks, and then he gets to re-up, and he still took less money, which to me shows with one great year that he had with New York, and he did. He had a great year, and he was still good in Dallas. And this kind of further proves my point of when you're put in a position where more responsibility is put on you, especially at that level, when you get more run, your opportunities increase, which increases your stats, which in theory gets you paid more. But with him taking that much of a discount, to me, it seems like something that I've been saying is you clearly are not a one dude. You're not a dude who we think that you can win a franchise or a championship with you as the franchise guy. If you're willing to take essentially 10 to 15 million dollars less per year, you don't even think that you're that dude. So it's not to say that Jalen Brunson is not good at basketball, because he is. This also isn't saying that he can't be part of what we like to just dumb down to as a big three. He can be, but this to me is it's a layered contract of he doesn't even think he's that good. On top of it's wild, man. The fact that you put that much faith in the Knicks is beyond me. I do understand though how the money's the money, right? Like it's still $40 million a year. That's still a lot. But also based on the fact of like he's not paying the New York state tax in every single game, right? Because the way that this works, that I don't think a lot of people understand, is you're still gonna get your state tax, but you pay the taxes on your game checks depending on where you're playing. So if he's playing in Texas, he's paying no state tax on that one. Now he's gonna have his tax from New York regardless, but it's not quite as terrible from the tax it as you would imagine. But one, again, the Knicks to me, they're gonna have to do the strength in numbers things, but at a discounted rate, basically. So like Boston has still the best starting five in basketball. And now you're going to have two basically max dudes, and Porzingis isn't cheap and Drew isn't cheap. You're going to have to be so exponentially better than them 1 through 7 or 8, but you lost Hartenstein as well. Like you're still not on Boston's level. You're going to have 8 to 9 dudes who can all hoop if you're going to be able to compete with Boston, who's very top heavy. Well, it's not even top heavy. They're the best starting five in basketball. It's crazy. But this to me doesn't move the needle, as I like to say. You're not. unless you really, really knock it out of the park with a true number one option, and Brunson can be your second or third option, it's just money that you are wasting, that you're not collecting on, basically. It's a disservice to you. And I don't know, man. Like, we're gonna dub when this first happened, it was a look, this is how you do it. That's a real team player. And then when the Knicks don't win anything, he's gonna be labeled as an idiot because he left 30 million on the table. Like, it's gonna take a while for us to get to that take. I mean, I'm already sitting there, but he's being championed and praised for taking a discount. But man, when you leave that much money on the table, if you don't win two in the next 4 years, you look like a idiot. Moving on. So Joe Burrow has said in this past week or so that he thinks that the NFL will go. Not this. I'm kind of paraphrasing. He's not saying the NFL will go to an 18 game season, but if they do, they should have a secondary bye week. Well, this was when the podcast was first getting off the ground. So a 17 game season wasn't even done. Like, it was agreed upon, but it was not actually, we hadn't seen it in real time yet. And once that happened, I went to the mic, did an episode and said, we're not that far away from having a 20 game season. And when we do, inevitably we're going to get it. I don't think it's a good idea. I think 20 is too much. I think it's too much football. If you have it go for too long, it starts to lose its everything that we love about it, because one of the reasons why we champion for football so much is because it is a shorter sample size. The regular season matters. They're more tuned in because the stakes are higher, right? The every game matters mentality. The more you put out there, the less eagerness there really is. But when you have 18 games, which it sounds like they're going to get to, you are going to need a second bye week. I want to say common knowledge, but I still do, to backtrack for a moment, I still think we're going to get a 20 game season at some point in time. But that might be 7, 10, 15 years down the road. But I see that being a real thing for American sports, is a 20 game football season. But Joe Burrow's the one who's saying, like, yeah, man, well, if we get 18, we're going to need that second bye week. And I don't think that he necessarily is the right messenger for that. Mostly because, look, the quarterback position, we all know, is the most protected besides kicker and punter. And even then, on based on the percentage of how many snaps you take, theirs is still a little bit more dangerous at times. But the quarterback position is very much protected. And if you're one of the guys who's really in the trenches, offensive line, defensive line, you're the one getting into 70 to 80 car crashes every single day, you probably don't want the most protected position speaking for you to play another game. Now I understand, well, dude, it's only one game. What's the problem? It's one game. It's not going to matter that much. It's another 60 to 80. And again, like for the lowly players who aren't playing that much, they might be okay with it because it is another game check, right? But the guys who are playing on their side of the ball, they're playing every single snap. And they're getting head on collisions 60, 70 times a game. They're going, yeah, I'm making like 2 million and you're making 50. How about you don't tell me I need to play another game, dog? And it's not even just the position. I think that for me, the way that I look at this is, it's not even just, you don't want the quarterback saying it, because the income discrepancy and disparity is so ridiculous between quarterbacks and other position players, right? Or not position players. We usually lump that into like wide receivers and tight ends and running backs, but you know what I mean? It's between the quarterbacks and like the big uglies, for lack of a better term, that protect you. You don't want to hear him do that. And you certainly don't want to do the guy who's benefited the most from this. Because Burrow's missed a lot of time. They're saying, bro, we don't need you caping up for more games. Yes, it's going to equate to more money and more revenue. It's going to be shared between the players. But again, for the extra game that you're playing, is that going to be enough for your quality of life later on? I don't know. But because Burrow's missed so much time, I don't think that he's the messenger that the NFL, well, the NFL needed him to say this, but as far as the players are concerned, and when I say with the players, I also mean like the players union. And I meant to talk on this with the Jalen Brunson thing was if you're taking that big of a discount, and I'll just piggyback for a moment, was with Jalen Brunson, like if you're taking that big of a pay cut, the players union isn't going to be stoked about that either. Like they're fighting to get players the most money. And if you're actively playing defense against them making money based on where we think that you sit in the hierarchy of NBA players, that's not gonna fly either. It's almost kind of like the Otani deal where he's gonna pay like $2 million, and they're like, how are you able to let this slide? Just for a couple of like off-brand examples. But when it comes to uh Burrow saying this, yeah, I think he's the wrong messenger. He's the right one for people who love the NFL because yeah, if we can get a top tier quarterback to say we want more games because it's more money for them, man, we don't care. Let's do it. But the players that are involved in this are probably going, could you stop that, Joe? Like you can't be doing this, man. But Burrow's young enough where, and whenever the next CBA is, what is it, 6 or 7 years down the road or something like that, he's still going to be able to capitalize again on another monster deal. I'm just saying, man, you got to pick and choose your battles better. Not even your battles, but your choice of words. And you might want to run it by the people who protect you before you start doing that again. Moving on. So I posted something the other day, and it was something from Nick Wright initially said this. Now I want to get the entire thing up before I just, okay. So, and I do know, I understand that a lot of folks have a lot of vitriol, a lot of hate for Nick Wright. And it's mostly because he's an annoying Chiefs fan. And I don't know when this really became a thing because when it came to journalism or just reporting and things like that, you weren't supposed to have a team. You weren't supposed to have a rooting interest. It was supposed to be unbiased. But we've come to this point where that doesn't matter anymore. It's just like Stephen A. Smith is a very renowned Knicks fan, and Nick Wright is a Chiefs fan. We got other people. Mina Kimes is a really big Seahawks fan. There used to be a point in time where the people that were giving us our news in the world of sports, you had to be unbiased. So we've kind of just adopted the fact that no, you're allowed to have your own team and you can have your own biases. And again, with Nick Wright, I understand because for me, I don't think he's as bad as what people write him out to be. I do think that his voice to me is annoying, but I think that my own voice is annoying. I don't even like hearing my own voice when I'm going back and re-listening to the content that I put out. I can't stand my voice either. Just to put some fairness on that take. But what he had put out into the universe was, as I told you on Friday, everyone wants Josh to be Peyton to Mahomes' Brady, but Mahomes is Peyton and Brady rolled into one. Now, if you have an issue with that, I understand it. If you say he's Peyton and Brady rolled into one, he's really not either of those dudes at all. And to say that he's the combination of the two, if you want to take arguing with that, I totally get. But he says, and Burrow seems to have the Big Ben lane taken care of. So Josh and the Bills have settled for Phillip Rivers Chargers. So the way that I'm reading that and the way that I interpret it when he brings up Joe Burrow is when he says that he's Ben Roethlisberger, is that Roethlisberger with the teams that he had in Pittsburgh they got their chips. They got two of them with Roethlisberger at the helm. But we don't consider Roethlisberger to be one of these, like, you can say all 10 greats. We need to find a line of demarcation because he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I think that we all agree with that. But when we say all-time great, I feel like we have to have a cutoff point of when you can't be categorized as that. So I know he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but I don't consider him to be an all-time great. But Roethlisberger was able to sneak in between Manning and Brady, who we do consider on that all-time great list, and was able to sneak a couple Super Bowls. But his team was ridiculous, right? He had a great defense, the run game, coaching, all that good stuff. So, and I'm not saying that Joe Burrow necessarily has those coaching and team advantages, but because Brady and Mahomes, like Brady only the last couple of years when he was in Tampa, he's been retired for a couple of years now, but even when he was in the AFC with the Pates or with the Patriots, almost the Pates and the Patriots with the Patriots was It was Mahomes and Brady. It was those two dudes. It was you knew what the outcome was going to be. It was one of those two teams, and one of those two dudes was going to represent the AFC. And now it's just been Mahomes. What he's getting at is Burrow still found a way, or Roethlisberger still found a way to get a couple rings. And even though we don't consider him one of the greats, he slid in. Rivers wasn't able to. When he had the roadblock that was Brady, that was Manning, but I think they had what, one or two AFC championship games that they got to, but they're always running into those two dudes. And Josh Allen and the Bills have essentially become the Chargers. Like, it's not just the fact that they were number 17 that they're going to be one and the same. Josh is going to have way less kids. I could tell you that much. He's got way less kids than Philip Rivers as well. But the underlying part of this is Mahomes is the roadblock, just like Manning, and just the fact that like that Manning and Brady were. A lot of people are taking offense to it though, like, well, Josh Allen is either A, way better than Philip Rivers, which I don't subscribe to that rule. If you want to, you can. And this really is, right? I've beaten to death the whole Josh Allen thing about where I see him and how I view him. But this is really the year. Without Stephon Diggs, we're gonna really see how much he's actually grown as a quarterback. Uh, yeah, like, and people still loved it. They do. They're constantly on Josh Allen's all the time, and I don't understand it. To Nick Wright's point, he's most remembered for a loss, and we don't really do that with anybody else. Like, when it comes to sports, especially football, your loss can't be the most impressive thing on your resume. Now, again, I don't subscribe to this rule, but I'm saying you can't put that on every single other person, every other quarterback, and then go ahead and pick and choose. Like, well, Josh, we like him though, so we're gonna go ahead and just move the goalpost, not even just ever so slightly, all the way. Nah, man. So when Nick is saying that the Bills and Josh Allen are basically Philip Rivers and the Chargers, I don't think it's a bad comparison. It's actually relatively spot on when you think about it. Moving on. So Kawhi Leonard is booted from Team USA. We're not really booted. He says he's not going to play. And they replace it with Derek White, and people are pissed off at that. So it should be Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown, from what I understand, was actually offered a spot on the Olympic team and turned it down. Not recently, but months ago. Apparently, I think Ryan Russillo. I don't want to misspeak and get my sources wrong, but I'm pretty sure that it was Ryan Russillo who had said he already had an opportunity and turned it down. And then, like, okay, well, listen, good Derek White. But to get back to Kawhi, people are bringing up the question now, like, should he retire? And I don't know if you've ever been in the predicament to be able to make $40+ million and not play, but I don't think he's going to retire. It's, if you want to talk, once we get back again to the good, and I'm not even 100% certain on how the sports where the money is 100% guaranteed, like the NBA is, like, could he retire and make his money? I don't think he can. I think he has to. I think his contract is essentially terminated at that point in time. I could be wrong. Somebody smarter than me and a capologist is going to have to correct me on that. But it's also, why would you retire if you know that you're going to get that money anyways? So you can be disappointed in Kawhi. I feel like most of us have gotten to that point where there was a point in time in Kawhi Leonard's career where we were getting ready to anoint him as like one of the greatest players, is like, at least of this generation, right? We were dangerously close. Like, we got to a point where we're saying Kawhi Leonard is one of the best players in the NBA, if not the best player. That was late San Antonio, and then also when he played uh, for the Raptors and they won their championship run with him, was Kawhi is the dude. And if you're looking at strictly from the metric of playoff basketball, Kawhi is one of the best playoff basketball players we've ever seen. So, but we were so quick. Maybe that's being a little unfair, but we got to a point where we were really confident that Kawhi was going to start challenging guys like LeBron, Kevin Durant, Steph for best player of this generation. And over the past 3 years or so, that's completely been diminished. And we do like sometimes I have to pick and choose like well, your best ability is availability. And also it's well, if I can get that guy when he's right, I'd rather have him right for half my games than have him miss more games and re-injure something. There's always going to be this back and forth, and there's always going to be this perplexing out this outlook on Kawhi because when he's right, he's so damn good. But you're not getting that version of him anymore. So with him backing out from the Olympics, this feels like it's a little column A, little column B, where it's the Clippers are saying we don't want you to, and him saying I don't really want to play much basketball either. Maybe I'm good now. Because this entire Clippers thing has failed anyways with him and Paul George. It's been a complete and utter failure, which I don't like doing. But you had such high hopes, and those two dudes together they couldn't put anything together, mostly because of the time missed by Kawhi. It feels like there were other moves as well, right? Like James Harden probably wasn't the best option at certain times. What we need to really do now is scale back the expectations of where we put Kawhi in the entire pecking order of the greatest of all times. Because in San Antonio had a great run, but he was also part of some really great teams. And we're not always consistent on who the great player is and who the great team is. Like we used to put it as the Spurs were the organization. That is the crown jewel of professional basketball. That is how you run a team. Everyone unselfish. That's the quintessential team and how you build it is the way that San Antonio did it. Then you get rid of Kawhi. He wins a championship his very first once he gets to Toronto. Then the narrative changes to, oh, well, Kawhi's that good. Maybe the rest of your team wasn't that good. And to kind of go off on a tangent for a bit, when I had asked people who are their top 10 players of all time, I was more trying to poke and see where Tim Duncan landed because I didn't get a consensus top 10 from anybody or from everybody, I should say, that Tim Duncan was a top 10 player. It was higher than I thought. But when we really look back on it is, do we consider him to be a top 10 player because he has the rings? Because that's what we're doing now, like with Kawhi was once he left and we saw how good he was in Toronto, it's, oh no, that dude's really good. But was Tim more of the, again, part of the system, part of the coaching system and the culture, or however you want to label it as, if he didn't have five, would we consider him to be the greatest power forward ever? Even if he had three, I don't think that we do. I think that the narrative changes. Rings shouldn't matter that much, but they do. Like, I'm not saying that Tim Duncan wasn't great because he was. But if one of the guys who I always, and I know I'm going off on another tangent and I'm taking another off ramp, but for me, Kevin Garnett was better than Tim Duncan. When I see what Kevin Garnett was able to do with some just absolute cheeks Minnesota teams. And to me, Kevin Garnett played their games weren't similar like with him and Duncan. But when I look at Garnett as far as he could have easily, in my opinion, averaged 5 to 7 more points, a couple more rebounds, if he was just more aggressive, but I felt like he played the game in the sport of basketball more to its purest form of how it should be played. And that's what Tim did as well. But if he wanted to be more aggressive and just get his, Kevin Garnett would have been ridiculous as far as overall stats are concerned. That dude would have been a monster and would have been in what most people consider like in their top 5 to top 10 best of all time as well. But because he was part of a trash organization that wasn't very good, and you get to that point, right? It's like you're the best player on this team. Why can't you must not be that good if you couldn't lift them. There's only so many dudes who can take just a absolute cheeks roster and drag them to the playoffs continuously. Only a handful of dudes ever. Kevin Garnett wasn't one of those guys, but Duncan was one of those guys also that had David Robinson and had Popovich and Manu and Tony Parker. Like that squad was a squad. You know what I'm saying? So would we look at Tim Duncan differently without a couple less rings? And the answer to that riddle is yes, we absolutely would have. So when it comes to Kawhi, we put him on this pedestal so early on, and over the past 4 or 5 years, it's just, yeah, do we know you're good, but can you play? Like, just be on the court. Can you just be ready? And it doesn't look like you can. So the long and short of all of this is, would or should Kawhi Leonard retire? If he's being honest with himself, he probably should. Because if we're talking about taking up roster spots, why are you taking up a roster spot if you're not going to play, dude? Like, that's what all the NBA fans are telling me. I will do. You're taking up a roster spot when it comes to like Bronny James, or when it comes to Udonis Haslem with the Heat. These guys who are going to be the 12th to 15th man on the roster who aren't going to get any playing time. And so, well, you're taking a roster spot away from somebody else. Not really, because in order to take a roster spot away from somebody, you have to play. The person who's really taking money and playing time and experience out of people's hands is Kawhi. Because Kawhi, at this point in time, if he's not going to be able to play, then you should hang it up, bro. But come on. That money, he ain't giving that up. So we'll go ahead and hang it up pretty shortly. Say I had, a father-son moment the other day that, for all the parents out there who are wondering if you're doing a good job, is if you're present and you're putting in the time and the effort, like, you're doing a good job. Like, it's really difficult to be a parent. And I think that this was something that, so to put in perspective, my wife was on a softball trip this past weekend, and she took my son and two of his friends with her. So, he's at that age where he's, hormones are kicking in, and, he's trying to go to bed, and I can hear him like kind of fussing and stuff. So I was like, "Oh man, like, what's going on? You okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm fine, but I'm frustrated because I feel like you and mom treat me different than my friends." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, because you're our kid. Like, you're under our supervision." She goes, "No," or he said, "No, like, when if friend A and friend B, if they do something, you guys will say, well, you should, no, it's okay. Don't worry." And with me, you're like, "Why? You need to be better about this, dude." And I'm like, "Listen here, man, you are our kid, right? Like, what we have to understand is that you are our responsibility. And we are also telling you these things. If there's a repetitive thing that we have to continuously tell you to take care of, it's going to be frustrating because it's every single day, multiple times a day. And at some point in time, you have to care, right? Like, you have to make the progression and show us that you're taking those steps. We see these kids like once every few weeks, once every few months. Like, our job is not to parent them. Our job is to make them feel comfortable and welcome in our home or in our environment and with you and things like that. It's the same thing like when you're with Jima and Jeepa. Jima and Jeepa aren't going to parent you, right? They are going to make sure that you are welcoming, or that you're being welcomed there and you're having fun when you're visiting. The real parenting is done by the parents. And one of the things that I had to tell him that I thought was kind of eye-opening to him was, I told him, like, "Look, you have no idea, like, being a parent's really difficult, but being a kid is difficult too." And that kind of like opened his eyes, like, "No, it's not. Like, being a kid's awesome," because he's only looking at it from the perspective of, he's like, "Dude, you guys feed me and I get to play outside and I have video games. Like, it's not difficult." And I'm I'm throwing him a bone. I'm like, it is difficult, especially in this environment, in the way that you grew up in this COVID environment and stuff. Like, your interactions are different, and or just the amount of exposure you've had to certain things are different. Like, I get it. Your development and the way that things happen around you is completely different than what than it was with me. So being a kid is difficult. And he kind of he took that and he used he's obviously like into video games. He's almost 10, so very much he's into, his Minecraft and Zelda and things like that. But we get to the point of, he uses words that he's not always 100% on par with the words that he should use. So he said the word skilled. And I said, well, parenting is difficult. He goes, well, not if you're skilled. And I kind of laughed and I asked him, well, what about people who have millions of dollars and they pay somebody else to watch their kid? Is that skilled? Because people with a lot of money, sometimes they feel like their time isn't worth it. So they pay somebody else to watch their kid. And he goes, well, no, I guess that isn't a skill. And I said, yeah, like parenting itself is a skill. Like this isn't something where he's doing word association with skill as in, an attribute with his video games, speed, stamina, strength, evasion. Like that's what he's like, well, if you're skilled, it's easy. And it's like that isn't how that works. And yeah, we're kind of talking out in real time. And just for the parents out there, it ain't easy, but it ain't easy beating a kid either. Cut your kids some slack sometimes. Don't let them walk all over you, but cut them some slack sometimes. But also cut you some slack. You're doing great. As long as you're active in their lives and you're doing what you can, you're doing a good job. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and hang it up for the day. You guys know the drill. You can like, share, subscribe, smash the 5-star reviews on every audio platform that is out there. Stay up, stay blessed. I'll catch you guys on the next one.